You know, when I was 6 or 7 years old, there was segregation. And so I was part of that in Lawton. And that meant that blacks were separated from white people. And so what happened there was a lot of unspoken rules in terms of how we as a black culture interacted with white people. For one, like I remember my relatives, we would always say, no sir, yes sir, no ma'am, no ma'am. And like we would never like look white people in the eye. I mean, if a white person came up to you, you would just look down and you wouldn't really look them in the eye. And never would you like argue, or if somebody said something that you disagreed with, you would go just yes sir and walk on. And so that was the cultural norm in the family that I grew up around. Then a couple of things started happening. One was Malcolm X came out in the 60s, and he was like, we used to get an Ebony magazine and Jet magazine, because you never heard about Malcolm X like on your 5 o'clock news. But he was the first black that really talked assertively with whites. And I mean, he would talk about things, and he would say, stand up for your self-esteem. And also about that time, Muhammad Ali came out, and Muhammad Ali was the same. I mean, usually all athletes said was yes sir, and we did it for the team. And he came out and he said things like, I am the greatest, I'm going to win this at 5. And it was just outrageously assertive for a black man to come out and talk that assertively in a white world. And so as those two came out, more blacks started kind of coming into prominence and to coming in terms of being assertive. So much so that within 10 years, the tipping point had switched completely. And in terms of that, if you acted not assertive, there was something the matter with you. And I remember there were all the old movies where blacks were portrayed as butlers and maids, and like in Shirley Temple, like as sidekick. Those blacks were looked at as sellouts and Uncle Toms. And so suddenly, for you to act not assertively, to act demure to a white person was kind of a sellout. This had a huge impact on me as a child growing up. When I was in the 7th grade, I was bused to a school that was integrated. And I actually did fairly well. I mixed, and pretty soon I had friends of all races, black and a lot of Hispanics. And when I went to high school, I became very popular. There's 36%, I don't know why that number sticks with me. It was 36% blacks at that school. And but I really fit in very well. So much so that they made me the school mascot. And then, which we were the East High Angels, so I would dress up in an angel costume. And whoever we were fighting against or playing our sports against, I would go and like shoot them with the arrow during the pep assembly, and the angel would kill our opponent. And so that kind of ended up leading into me helping the cheerleaders lead cheers. Now, cheerleading at that time was much different than it is now. There was no somersaults or flips. It was mostly me running around, flapping my arms, going, yay, 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 team, yay. And so that was, and so it was very fun. After one of the games, though, some older black kids called me over to their car, and they said, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, you act like all that dancing, you're acting like an Uncle Tom, which to me was like accusing me of being a mass murderer. And so immediately inside, I just started rejecting anything where white society accepted me. And one of those things that I started rejecting was kind of the concept of being of service. The definition, let me look at my note here somewhere. Whew. The definition, I want to get this right. Oh, also, it's right here. Also, I found so I became like this very angry, tough, aggressive black man. But I also suffer from a lifelong character defect of people pleasing, meaning that I always sacrificed my own integrity so that people will like me or not be mad at me. So what that is combined into is I was like this angry black man that was trying to make you like me. So it was it was very confusing for me, and so it was just a very, very hard time. And I remember reading a book by Eldridge Cleaver, and he was in the Black Panthers, and he wrote this book called Soul on Ice. And in there, he said that he used to hate the police department because he just hated them. He hated the police. I mean, I don't know if you're old enough to remember police were called pigs. And he said, but what he found out that no matter how much he hated them, that it had no impact on them, that he was the one that was filled with hate. And so he started looking at the police with kindness in his heart. And so that really struck with me. And so I started doing that because I had this thing. For one, I kept breaking the law, but I kept getting pulled over by the police all the time. And even like I was in Denver, and I'd be walking down the street, and a policeman would see me, and they would just stop their car, whip it around, and turn in and check and see if I had any warrants out for me. And so I just like hated those guys because they were just constantly harassing me. But it was probably because I was constantly breaking the law. But that part didn't get to me. So, but I did start kind of looking at how to have kind thoughts in my heart about the police department. So I quit calling them pigs, and I just started calling them police officers. And so I tried in my mind to kind of quit doing that. Well, a funny thing is I actually quit getting pulled over, and I quit getting harassed by them, and it was like they magically disappeared. The word service means, let me make sure I can get this right. The word service means to do something for. The word servitude means your freedom is taken and you do something because you're told to do it. And I had always acted under the impression that service meant servitude, that I was just your slave and I would do what you wanted, and I didn't want to be your slave. I wanted, but then I started saying that, man, but service, there's something about service. And so these things happened to me. Marianne Williamson, the author, she says that a miracle is a change in perception. And like sometimes you ever drive around, sometimes I'll drive a street that I drive all the time, and then you walk that street and you notice like all these things you never see when you're driving. Like you go, oh man, there's that tree, and I never saw that house over there. And so your perception changes. And so when I started looking at police department, when I started looking at the police department with my heart changing and to be in kind of a more of service to them, I started realizing, well, police have families that care about them, and they spend their time risking their life to keep me safe. And they usually go to places that I try and avoid just so that I'm safe. And so I started having this change of perception of how I saw them. And I go, for me to go from somebody that like hated the police to somebody that sees like that I have this kinship with them, that is a change in perception, and that is a miracle that happens. And I emceed a charity basketball game a few months ago for all these different police departments, and we spent like the entire day together. We spent like, and I make fun of them and tease them. They go play ball, and so. But I was thinking, 40 years ago, if you would have told me that I was going to spend an entire day with an entire police force and have fun, I would have thought you were crazy. And so, but a change of perception is such a powerful, powerful miracle that happened to me. When I'm always like, I was very suspicious of Christianity. And I remember as I started understanding some of the teachings of some of the spiritual leaders, not just Jesus, but like Buddha. And one of the things that really interests me with the teachings of Jesus is he talks about service a lot. But I noticed that he always chose who he was going to be of service to. Like I remember the one story where he's walking in this crowd of people, and all these people are pressed on him. And this one woman touches his garment, and he says, "Who are you?" And he goes and he serves her. Why did he pick that one person out when he had all these people that he could have chose from? Why? Because he was the one choosing to be of service. And you choosing to be of service is much different than you feeling like that you're a prisoner of being of service. I notice the words that I say all the time in terms of things that I do. I have to go pick up my child. I have to go to work. I can't take time for myself right now. I'm too busy. And I realize that my words keep me a prisoner. It makes me servitude. When I could actually change those words, I'm going to pick up my daughter. I'm going to work now. I'm going to take time for myself. And so suddenly my acts of service are choices that I make and not a prison that I have that's keeping me locked in. Throw that one away. I have found that service is my connection to the world. And that you know, the thing that's interesting, because really I'm great friends with some of you here, and the thing that makes our relationship work is being of service. I mean, if Jesse and I just got together and sit down and played cards once a month, we would have nothing. But I mean, both of our lives, like, we choose to be of service, and that makes our differences disappear. And so when people treat me in a certain way, when people treat me, because there's people that are mean, and there's people that are angry, and there's people that are fearful. I was looking at the news today about, you know, terrorist attacks in London. And when I read that, I realize that my answer to that is I just go and try to be of service to the next person in front of me. And it's not like I don't have to go to Bangladesh and like feed the poor, but I mean like going to the grocery store and saying hello to the person that's doing my, you know, checking me out, or my waitress to ask how they're doing, or my waiter, and to really be of service to people that I run into constantly all the time, that I tend to ignore, or that I tend to be so focused on myself that I don't see them. I was in the store one day, and this jar of spaghetti fell on the floor. I didn't knock it down. Somebody walked by and they hit this jar and it busted. I mean, there's spaghetti sauce all over. And this worker came in, and so I started cleaning up. So I bent out and I started helping him, and he says, "You don't have to help me." And I just ignored him. And so we cleaned it up. I mean, he mopped, and it just took a few minutes. And so I went on. But I wonder, so at the end of his day, did he think man, what a terrible day that spaghetti sauce fell. But did he also have in that thought, well, somebody came and helped me clean that up. And so for me to be able to offer those opportunities is a miracle, because it might be something that he goes, that was very helpful. And so that is a miracle, because it could change his perception of how he saw what happened to him that day. If I go up and talk to somebody that's checking, at the grocery store, which there are problems with that, because sometimes I ask them how they're doing, and they actually really tell me a lot. And people are like lined up for blocks. Could we just get our groceries now? And but for me to stop and talk and say, it looks like you're having a busy day. And yes, I am. And so for me to be of service is such a freeing thing. And it's a tool on keeping me connected to the world. Because what happened to me when I was a child was God was showing me some ways to stay connected, and I got very confused about that. And I lost one of the tools that kept me connected to the rest of the world, to be of service to my fellow man. And so what I have learned is the way that I fight through my differences with people, the way that I go and talk to people that I'm afraid of, is I just practice being of service. And it makes me go back to the very beginning with my relatives and growing up, and things that we used to call being an Uncle Tom or a sellout. Maybe they understood that maybe they weren't afraid. Maybe they weren't doing service out of fear. Maybe they realized the power and the dignity you have when you allow yourself to be of service to another human being. Thank you guys very much.